Sekou Star. This is your man, Sekou Kesley. You already know, man. Today we're gonna talk about something that is one of my favorite topics to discuss, which is international affairs or international relations, right? And really we're gonna focus on the Ukraine war. But before we dive into that, if you're new to the channel, you already know what to do. Please click, subscribe and like, comment. For those of you who already been member of the channel, you know what to do, man. Hey, guys, listen. So a friend of mine hit me up the other time, was like, hey, Sekou, what do you think about the Ukraine war? I was like, in what sense? He's like, who's winning? What's going on? Like, I want to know more. I'm like, you know what? What I think probably doesn't matter to a lot of people. But anyway, I have my opinion, right? I'm entitled to it. So I'm going to share with you what I share with my friend. So the discussion went something like this. And I told him, I was like, hey, to be honest with you, from what my analysis of this whole situation, Russia is winning the propaganda war. The US, the West, and NATO are winning the war. So let me paraphrase that. Russia is winning the propaganda battle because it's not even the war. It's the battle that Russia is winning, the propaganda battle. And I'm gonna describe what propaganda is and how is that going. The propaganda battle, Russia is winning 100%. But the US, NATO, the US and her allies are winning the real war, the power war, right? And those are pause, like I'm pausing right now because I need to explain all this. On the other hand, China and Saudi Arabia and India are gaining a lot. Now, for China, we know there are a few things that I'm gonna talk about in the coming. Saudi Arabia also becoming a major player, moving things around, which we're gonna get to as well. India is just benefiting, putting herself in a position where she's gonna be able to check China at some point. Let's get down to that as well. All right, so how Russia is winning the propaganda. Russia are good at bringing, this fake news, made up stories to sell themselves in the light that make them seem as the winners, right? So they propagate, they bring stories, made up things. For instance, one of the major propaganda that hit the internet and everybody was going crazy about it was that the US dollar is collapsing, the de-dollarization and all that stuff, how the BRICS nation would come together and form this super duper alliance and dominate the global economy, and the US is done, the US is dying right now. That was propaganda. That is propaganda. Because when you look at the BRIC nation, there's no official statement anywhere that one of these BRIC nations are actually, taking these steps. Yeah, China is making trade with Brazil in their local currency. That's nothing major. The US dollar still remains supreme, right? About 80% of global trade is in US dollars right now as we speak. And we don't see that going away easily. That's just a propaganda. The BRIC nation cannot make up a currency right now that could be able to compete with the US dollars. We are seeing alternatives to the US dollars that haven't stood the test of time. There are a lot of alternatives. Even the EU, the European Union, came out with an alternative, right? Euro. We're seeing how that is going against the US dollar. So there are other alternatives that haven't really been able to beat the US dollars. The US dollars is solid, and it will remain solid for some time. Yes, the BRICS have the opportunity if they do come together, but just imagine 5 different philosophies, 5 different ideology from different continents and different places coming together and being able to create. In order for them to create a currency, they have to have a central bank creating a central bank. I mean, it's gonna take them time. Hopefully they do it, but that was just one of those propaganda, the Russian, and you will see it from the cryptocurrency people, the Russian, sites, and all these people just putting all these stuff out there, making people believe that we are all gonna, like, the US dollar is gone. That's not the case. Matter of fact, even when you look at the trade between India and Russia, right now, Russia is like, because again, let me bring how India is winning. Well, India has been gaining from this whole thing. India used their rupee to buy the Russian oil, but the rupee is like such a weak currency. The Indian rupee is such a weak currency that Russia is now struggling to say, okay, we cannot continue getting this rupee while India is pretty much getting our oil for free at this point. How are we going to be able to benefit? We need a currency that is stronger. So that default currency remains the US dollars. So you start saying that, no matter what they do, the US dollar remains there. So that propaganda that everybody was happening, my friend, go get some sleep. The US dollars, keep your dollars for now. I'm not, maybe 20 years from now, maybe, we don't know. But it was just a propaganda. And those are the kind of war that the Russians are winning, right? Winning the propaganda war in the sense like making it seem like Russia, is taking over. Russia remains a super power that is so scary, and Putin is like the man, that martial man, not knowing he's like somewhere in the bunker, hiding himself from everybody. But that's a war, The image of Putin is like, he's a strong man. And that honestly puts fear in a lot of people who don't know this man, who haven't been studying his moves, right? So, in that front, Russia is definitely winning. Now, when it comes to real power, because one of the reasons that Russia claimed to have invaded or attacked Ukraine was that they wanted what? For Ukraine not to join NATO, for Ukraine not to be too friendly with the West and all that stuff. So they have failed. Now Ukraine is petitioning to join the NATO, and Finland, Russia neighbors that was like neutral for a long time, have decided to join NATO. So it's like Russia has defeated the whole purpose. Now NATO is literally right at your nose at this point. So you are losing when the power in geopolitics, the power play, Russia is actually losing, because now even her allies, China, all these allies are now making bold statements to say, okay, we're gonna defend Russia, we're gonna do this. It's like, yeah, okay, we're not gonna condemn Russia in the strongest of terms, but it's not like they are standing up for Russia, right? So you start saying that the NATO, on the other hand, is gaining more allies, gaining more ground. And because, Finland joining NATO was a complete insult. Like, it's like right in your nose kind of insult, like slap right in your face to Russia. If Russia wants to remain that supreme, wants to regain that Soviet Union, all that territory, Finland, Ukraine, Poland, all those supposed to be part of the Soviet Union. That dream is dead because of this war. So that's a big loss. I don't care how you put it. Geopolitically, that's a big loss for Russia. Period. Point blank, no argument there. Right? Now, moving on to how China is pretty much winning. China, on the other hand, is basically getting oil from Russia on cheap basis, right? Using their yuan, making trade with Russia, trying to get as much oil as possible, because China is a huge country, is consuming a lot. So China is getting as much as they could get, discounted oil. So at the end of the day, Russia is the one suffering from all that. Russia is losing her people, military, manpower. Of course, Ukrainians are dying also. We have to say that. But Russia is just losing manpower, military capacity, showing how weak the Russian army is. Because before, people used to respect the Russian army as the boogeyman. But now it's like, okay, the boogeyman is in the war and they're losing terribly, right? The missile that they were talking about, this sonic missile, they put it to test, didn't work according to the way it was supposed to work, right? You see in the Wagner group threatening to start fighting in Belmont. Pretty much the Russian army cannot fight, so they have to send these mercenaries to fight for them. And these mercenaries are threatening that they're gonna withdraw from the front line if they're not getting the supply. So you start seeing that Russia as a nation, and there are reports of the troops running, fighting with outdated weapons, tanks and all that stuff. So you start saying that, the Russian army, the fearful Russian army, apart from the nuclear weapon, there's no motivation there. So that's a big L for Russia in my book. Take it how you want it. Now Saudi Arabia is there like outmaneuvering everybody, even the United States in this case. Saudi Arabia is like just being smart, moving things around, making sure that, buying oil from Russia so that they could control the market, right? The United States is begging Saudi Arabia, okay, let's make sure OPEC, please talk to your people, make sure that the oil prices remain, at certain levels. Like Saudi is like, nah, we're not gonna do that. We're gonna do what we wanna do. So the prince is just like making moves, literally, like playing checker while some of these guys are playing chess. Right? I mean, playing chess while some of these guys are playing checkers, right? Like the king he's like basically like maneuvering, right? And diversifying the Saudi economy while he's doing that. Whether you like it or not, he's really winning. Like, diplomatically, he's making strides, right? China also making a lot of moves there, making sure that there's peace in the Middle East by, making this new peace deal between Saudi and Iran, which are like oil producing. But China is also doing that for her own interest, because if there's peace, guess what? China will get the oil that they need for consumption without trying to, paying too much, and there'll be some kind of, hopefully, bilateral agreements. But at the end of the day, like I was answering my friend question, when you really look at the Ukraine war today as we stand, unfortunately, a lot of people have died. But looking at the politics of it, in the geopolitical context, Russia is losing. Ukraine is losing. The West and NATO are winning. China is winning. Saudi Arabia is winning. India is getting cheap oil. And that's really what it is, if you just look at it pure geopolitical terms, right? And the BRICS are making headway. Are they gonna go make something substantial out of this whole thing, BRICS nation? I think the pressure is coming from Russia for them to do something, but will they be able to do anything? That's up to be seen. But as we are, human beings, we cannot predict way in the future. But there's definitely a huge sentiment for for the BRICS to succeed, especially in the not Western countries, right? The third world countries and other developing countries, they want to see themselves in leadership positions. So that's why this whole propaganda about the BRICS taking over the US and the US dollar going to hell and all this stuff, you see that everybody's like, yeah, we are tired of the United States and we are tired of the Western domination of the global narrative. And you see some kind of new global order. People are yearning for that. And to some extent, it's slowly happening. But the way people want to make it seem like it's happening in the instant, that's not the case. The West, especially America, still remains supreme in almost every field. So you look at the economy, you look at the military, you look at, anything, pretty much. At this point, the West, the collective West, we might add Australia, maybe Japan and here and there, and all the other countries, but the collective West still remains supreme that could change and that ought to change. But until then, this Ukraine war, Russia is only winning in propaganda, but in the military, they are losing. Thank you for watching. Make some comment. Let's keep this interactive. Peace and love, as always.